Greetings. This is Positivologist Lynette Turner, and welcome to the Positivologist is in the house. So come on in, grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, take a nice deep breath, relax, and get ready for an invigorating conversation. As you can tell by the name of the show, The Positivologist is in the house. This is a show that focuses on living your life through the lens of positivity. Now, this doesn't mean we don't fall off of the positivity wagon. We all do, including myself. But we have the choice each and every day to get up and live that life with a great positive focus. And for me, it's just as easy to live positively as negatively, so I encourage everyone to do the same. You can connect with me after the show at www.positivebliss.com. So I have the blessing and the honor and the privilege to have a platform by which I can talk to amazing, incredible people who are living their life through that positive lens. And you're in for a real treat tonight. We have Carly Randolph Pittman with us, and she is an expert on sugar addiction, as well as just food and how we have our relationship with food and what we can do to have a better relationship with food. And I'm extra excited that she's going to be talking about sugar because family and friends who know me know that that is my issue. We all have something, and that's my issue. And it's upfront, honest, a constant challenge my entire life. I go through long periods of time where it's not an issue, and then for sometimes reasons unknown, although I'm sure someplace buried deep in there is a reason, I fall off of the wagon. So I'm going to learn something tonight. We're all going to learn something tonight, and I'm just really happy and excited that Carly has agreed to be with us. She's a very busy lady, so we're delighted to have you. Welcome.
Thanks, Lynette. I was chuckling because when you told everyone to have tea, I'm like, I have my tea right here.
Yeah, and you can see like the little teacup right here.
Yeah, I thought I saw that in the corner.
It's very homey. You know, we're having a conversation. We're all among friends here. You know.
It's fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm very, very delighted. Yeah. So before we dive into this exciting, emotional, exciting topic, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes, Carly, and I'd like you to tell people about yourself and don't leave anything out. I know you wear many hats. I know you're a coach and a teacher and have this real empowerment and desire to help people in their relationship with food. So, and I know you've written several books as well. So tell us a bit about yourself. You can tell us about your books and also tell people how they can reach you. We'll do this again after the show, but if they want to reach out and work with you or get your books and materials afterwards, I want to be sure that they know how. So take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Lynette. It always feels really weird talking about yourself in that way. But
this lets me know that you're a person, and I can tell from your energy that you're not an ego person. But it's empowering for all of us to let ourselves do that and share our gifts with the world.
Yeah. So I'm a writer and a teacher, as you said. I'm a trainer and an activist, and really what I am is I'm a lover of the human heart. And what I teach primarily is something that I call growing human kindness, which is really about just how you have a compassionate and soft and accepting relationship with your humanity itself and all those hairy struggles like what you were talking about with sugar. And under that growing human kindness umbrella, I teach and write about sugar addiction and binge eating and overeating, body image and depression and anxiety. And I came to this work because in my own life I had over 20 years of eating disorders. You kind of name it, I've done it. I was bulimic, I was a compulsive binge eater, I was orthorexic, I had body dysmorphia. I kind of rode every ride in that amusement park. And so it was through my own journey as I walked through that and trying to understand myself that led me to it. It was more like the work called to me. So as you said, I've written several books and programs, and those include Overcoming Sugar Addiction, When Food is Your Mother, Heal Overeating Untangled, The 30-Day Lift, and I'm writing some new material, which is kind of fun, so you might even preview a little bit of that today. And that new material is really going to dive into healing the sugar wound, as I call it, and healing your relationship with sugar. And so you can find out about my work and my classes and my coaching and my books and programs on my website, which is www.growinghumankindness.com. And so you can sign up for my newsletter, which is the best way to stay in touch to learn about classes that I'm offering and programs. And you can find some of my things on Amazon as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I have to take my hat off to you, to people who are willing to share their own experiences, even if they were difficult, with other people, because I think sometimes that can be a challenging thing to do. So I'm curious to know what happened in your life to help you make that shift from dealing with these different issues that you had going on in your life to, I'm going to nurture myself or take care of myself or find help. And then to this other side where now you're the teacher and you're helping other people who are going through those same issues. And we know that there's a lot of people out there dealing with issues with food.
Yeah, as you're talking, what I'm thinking about is I got an email from a 17-year-old girl yesterday, and she was writing about that most of your articles seem geared towards adults, towards not teenagers, and would you please write something for teens? And my heart just ached for her as I read her story, because I could see so much of my 17-year-old self in her letter. So I was pretty cognizant when I was in college that I had a full-blown eating disorder. I was not in denial. What was most frustrating for me was, even with all my conscientiousness, I started seeing a counselor in college, and I read everything I could get my hands on, and I tried so many different things that my eating disorders were so sticky, is the best way I could describe them. And what really you're asking about, that moment that helped me switch, and what it was for me is when I became a parent. And I have 2 girls and 2 boys, and I had my girls first. And when I was with my eldest once, I overheard her making a comment about food and her body. And she made a comment about needing to fit into her skinny jeans. And it was just like a dagger in my heart, because I really thought that I never talked about food in front of my daughters. And I thought I was hiding it. I thought that it didn't matter, but I didn't realize, like all kids, they pay pretty close attention, and you can't.
Yeah, they're very observant. We think that they're not watching or listening, but they always are.
Yeah. And so that really broke my heart, because at the time, honestly, I was so frustrated, and I was also so discouraged in everything I was trying to do to heal my eating disorders, that I had just kind of given up. And I had this feeling of, well, I'm just going to be like every other woman I know who has some degree of body dissatisfaction and some degree of a disordered relationship with food. And I'm just going to be like one of those women, and it's just something I have to cope with. But my daughter making that comment, all of a sudden, it just really hit me that this is not just affecting me.
And so, Carly, did you deal with the issue on your own, or did you seek help somewhere?
Yeah, so I worked with some counselors. I worked with, gosh, you kind of name it, I did it. Because I also had lifelong challenges with depression and anxiety, and it was really hard to understand or parse them apart, even understand, well, what came first. So I looked at biochemical things, and I looked at physiological stuff. I was working with some integrative doctors, trying to understand how to care for my physiology, how to know what to eat. I was working with a counselor, doing spiritual practices. I did the whole gamut. I would say a turning point for me with my eating disorders actually came very, very late. And I would say that underneath all my eating disorders, one of the threads that kind of fueled it was such a feeling of brokenness and such a feeling of shame, this sense that it's my fault I have this, I need to fix it, I'm doing something wrong. It was almost like I divided my life in before and after. And so it was before the eating disorders began and after, and I was always trying to get to that space of before the eating disorders began. And so as long as I was looking at myself through that lens of being broken, and there's something wrong with me. And the biggest thread underneath that was it's my fault.
Right.
I had so much shame and so much guilt of, particularly because I was such an earnest spiritual seeker. In
Mm-hmm.
some ways, all my spiritual seeking backfired a little bit because it built all this internal pressure of, why haven't you fixed this yet? So the shift for me came about when I stopped fighting my eating disorders. And I really looked at it as um, something that was mine to care for, something that was mine to relate to, something, I like the way other people have said it. It's not something that you're responsible for, it's something you're responsible to.
Right.
And that shift softened some of the guilt and the self blame and the shame that no matter what I was doing on the surface to try to binge less or purge less or eat less sugar, because it was fueled by that frantic, and it was very much a frantic sense of, I need to get a handle on this. I need to fix it.
Right.
Um, and I need to fix it now. And such anxiety and alarm about it.
As I listen to you, I think about my own issue with sugar, and I can just remember as a young child, we used to have like not granulated sugar, but sugar cubes sitting on the table in a little cup. And every time I'd walk from one room through the dining room to the other side of the house, I would just pick up a sugar. I mean, I just never gave it a second thought, and I just loved it. It was so good. And I remember walking to school. We'd have to walk by a little store that had candy, and I take some of my lunch money. Sorry, mom and dad, and buy candy with it. And it just always was. Even as a young age, when I ate a lot of it, I knew I didn't feel good. And then as I was older and read about it, and I know it isn't good for you. I remember when I read the book Sugar Blues. I mean, you think after you read Sugar Blues and it explains that it's as potent and powerful and dangerous as cocaine that I'd never eat another, you know, box of cookies. Notice I said box, not cookie, because that's.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it has been interesting and frustrating. It feels good when months can go by when I don't eat any sugar, and I've really tried to track it because I know there can be these triggers, and so I'm like, okay, is it when I'm happy, or when I'm sad, or when I'm tired, or when I'm excited? And it's like it can be any of those things. For me, I haven't found a particular trigger that takes me over the edge. Also, because I don't tend to. I mean, if I eat enough sugar and I don't exercise, I can gain weight. But I've always been a fairly thin person, so it's not one of those things. Even like, oh, okay, I've gained 10 pounds because of the sugar, so that's my incentive. You know what I mean? My incentive to
Yeah.
stop. And then the other thing that's been challenging is that people don't take sugar addiction as seriously as other addictions. They don't. I mean, and it's like you wouldn't go up to an alcoholic and say, "Here, have a drink." But I can't tell you how many people will be like, even God bless them, even though they know I'm trying to be good about the sugar. Like, oh, just have this one cupcake, or I made this, banana bread, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard and challenging. And so I know one of the things we talked about when we were preparing is that whole thing about what to do when you go out and there's this sort of pressure of other people, and what do you say or how do you handle that so that you don't get even more stressed out. You don't want to offend people who've spent 4 hours in the kitchen making strudel or whatever they're doing. But it's hard.
Yeah. Um, so I'm happy to talk about that, although I have to be really honest, and that is that at this point in my life, I do eat sugar.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I bet you don't eat 4 bags at a time,
I
right?
don't. It took me a
Yeah.
long time to
That's
get
the
that way.
thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can be in moderation and just have like a piece of cake, and other times I eat 4 pieces of cake. So because I don't want to be that person that literally says I'm never going to have another,
Yeah.
ice cream cone. But I need I want consistency in the moderation. So I think
Yeah.
I know there's some people who are just like they don't eat it at all. And you know what? How can you not eat it at all? It's in ketchup. It's in everything anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's
Um,
interesting because, and for a long time, Lynette, I did try to completely abstain. That was my approach. And I wrote a book about it. That's what I wrote Overcoming Sugar Addiction about.
mhm,
And then it
mhm.
was very interesting because after I wrote that book, I really thought that I had done my inner work around sugar. and I thought that I'd gone through the grieving process and I'd gone through a transformation, and that I had come to acceptance that I would not eat sugar again. And then I went through a really hard time in my life, and I absolutely went back to sugar.
Yeah.
So I rewrote the book,
Good for you.
and
Yeah.
and I talked about it openly, um, and the healing I've experienced of getting to a place where, for the most time, I don't think about it. I don't. But like I had ice cream on Saturday night after a date with my husband, and I did enjoy it, and it was delicious.
Yeah.
Um, and so how do you get there, I guess is the question, is how do you get
Yeah.
to that place?
Yeah.
And I think because my relationship with sugar in my 20s and in my 30s was very much out of control. I mean, it was a full-blown addiction, and it was an obsession, and I was fixated on it. And what I mean by that is I was as fixated about not eating sugar as I was about eating it. It just consumed so much of my mental and emotional energy. It was something that was always in the back of my mind, and I was always thinking about what I'm going to eat. I was always thinking about, okay, if I'm going to a party or I'm going to dinner at a friend's house, or there's the 4th of July is coming up, or Labor Day is coming up. What am I going to do when the candy and the cookies are there?
Right.
It wasn't
Halloween, Easter.
Halloween in October. Yes, it's a huge one for people. And so there's a couple of things that I found really, really helpful. One of it is I actually teach people that you need to feel your cravings more, not less. And I find that where a lot of people struggle is cravings are energy, and they're more than energy. They're actually things that are coming up for a reason. I think they're prayers in disguise. And they're often prayers that say things like, please care for me, please love me, please comfort me, please hear me, please notice me, please accept me. And we don't realize that's what they're saying because most of our lives are pretty full, and you really have to slow down to even listen to the cravings and to recognize that that's what they're saying and that's what they're yearning for. Um, and so if you look at them as prayers, as something that is asking for your attention, is something that is wanting to come up to the surface and arise, rather than all this energy of trying to control cravings. And everywhere you go, all the articles about sugar, 99% of them are about how to stop sugar cravings. And certainly this is not to discount that there's physiology going on. And it's not to discount that the combinations of foods you eat can absolutely affect your physiology. So part of my journey was learning how to eat in a balanced way that actually honored my biochemistry, that was keeping my blood sugar more constant, and recognizing the combinations of foods that make me feel really good. So for example, ice cream is a sugar treat that feels good for me because it has a lot of fat in it. And I'd had it after I ate, so my blood sugar was already pretty constant. So just because I give myself permission to eat sugar now doesn't mean I completely ignore the biochemical aspect and really understanding what sugar does to the body. It's rather through that healing process, my relationship with sugar has changed, and I can really tune into my body about what it needs or what makes it feel good and what doesn't. And I'm okay with setting the limit about what doesn't feel good. I don't eat ice cream every day. So if you look at cravings as just that, is that they are something that's asking for your compassion and your attention and your listening and your understanding. What happens when we get a craving is most people freak out. Internally or externally, it's the sense of anxiety or pressure, that oh God feeling of, and then there's this desire to clamp it down. You're trying to make it go away, so you might, and people employ all kinds of techniques, whether it's an emotional technique, whether it's a physical technique, whether it's a spiritual technique, to try to just cut out the craving. And what came to me in my own relationship with sugar and the cravings, or I think the cravings are actually even coming from the divine. And if we're trying to shut them down, what we're asking ourselves to do is actually close our hearts. And we're asking ourselves to shut down how life is appearing in that moment. In many ways, it's are saying, I don't want this moment to be what it is. I'm going to try to control you and make you go away because I don't want to feel what you're bringing to me. And so
It's
it
like when people
sounds,
say, oh, don't feel anger. Well, if you're angry, you need to feel it, move through it. You don't need to stay there, but you can't ignore that it's there. And I think what you're saying
yeah.
is the same type of thing. And then to me, it's about moderation. So when I'm in phases, like I just had a birthday, and some friends came from out of state,
Oh,
and we had
happy
like
birthday.
you know we had like a 3 day celebration, and we had dessert. But that's all I did. I didn't come
Yes.
back from the 3 days and keep eating it. I haven't had anything, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
What about,
Um,
there'll be a lot of people who are, you're at work, so you're busy during the day, and it's not really on your mind, you're not really thinking about it, and then you come home. And then a lot of times
yeah.
that's when people have the issue or the challenge, maybe because, oh, they're relaxing now, or so they don't have to think about
Yes.
work, and they just want to do something that feels good or have fun, and then, the two macaroons turns into a half a bag of macaroons. And do you have any
Yeah.
advice or guidance for people who find themselves, with that sort of
Yeah.
scenario?
Yeah, the end of the day is a huge time for people with sugar. It's the end of the day and at night. And it has to do partly with just what we talked about is when you're busy and you're going through your work life, it's easy if you've been having kind of subtle cravings for sugar all day, that it's easy for them to just push them aside, push them aside, push them aside, push them aside. And then you come home and your nervous system starts to come down a little bit. Same at night. And all that stuff that you've been subconsciously just kind of shove into the corner, it arises more. So I can talk right now and actually share with you something that I teach my students that's really
Please, that'd
helpful.
be great.
Yeah, and it's kind of a somatic exercise, so it's something I'm actually going to do, and it has to do with. So here's the thing with cravings: you absolutely have to feel them. You want to feel them more, not less, because they're energy and they need to move. And the other thing about cravings are you can feel them without acting on them. So saying you're going to feel it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to obey what it says. That
Right.
energy wants to move. So it's a little bit of a paradox. In some ways, it's making this container where there's lots and lots of room for the emotion and the craving to move. But while recognizing that ultimately you get to decide, is that something I want to act on or not? Because sometimes the answer may be, just like you did with your birthday, it's a time for joy and celebration.
Right.
And that might involve a dessert. At other times, it may not be the answer. And what you're really needing may be a nap. It may be to care for the emotions that are rising in you. It may be that you're needing exercising. It may be that you're feeling disconnected and
Yeah.
you're wanting to connect with your heart or connect with others. It may be simply that you're hungry. Your body is simply hungry and asking
And
for
so
food.
people probably have to figure out what that is for themselves, because it's going to maybe different. It's going to be different for different people. And you hit right on it. For me, one of the things is exercise. And so I'll literally, I'm on this whole Fitbit thing now. Everyone's got the little
Ah,
the band thing that tells you like how many steps you've taken and how many
ah,
calories you've burned and how many flights of stairs you. And when I feel like that, it's just, you're right, it's just energy that needs to move. And I will literally just get up and dance around or even walk in place,
mhm.
and it takes care of it. But I think it's everybody figuring out what that is for themselves.
Yeah. And so where people really struggle is, well, how do I know what that is? How do I figure that out? And so that involves a process of really slowing down and being in your body. And what happens is that craving for sugar can be something that's more impulsive. And it's the sense of it's what we think in that moment is what we're needing or wanting. Where the sugar could almost be a shorthand of it might be something deeper and more meaningful. And I'll make this really concrete with an example. So today I went through the experience where I was really yearning for celebration. I had gotten some lab results that brought such relief and just release in my heart. Like it's just this release of this burden I had carried because I gotten answers to some things that I had been really wondering about with my body. And when I got these lab test results, I noticed everything in me was just um, longing for that. And what I found myself was I was craving something sweet, like fruit or something. And I realized what the fruit was a shorthand for really needing to have a good cry to because it was such a release and such a relief. It was needing to have people that I love that are close to me, like a good friend, my husband, even my mom and dad. I was calling them or letting them know. I wanted to bring my loved ones close, to like create a village around me of this is something I want to share with you and celebrate with you. And what struck me was how in our culture we don't have a lot of those rituals or ceremonies in place
Right.
for those kinds of moments in our lives. Because life is so busy and we don't come from an indigenous culture that really honors those kinds of things um, here in the West. And so the shorthand is let's go out for dessert or let's go out to dinner. Our shorthand we do that is with food, and it's not that food and it's celebrating with food in and of itself is wrong. Almost every culture does that and
Right.
understands that that's a way that we connect with others. I mean, the word companion means with bread, which I always love. That idea of your companions are the people that you break bread with. Um, but when that's our only way of celebrating, what I needed was I needed people to dance with me in a circle. I just cried. I needed people just to lay hands on me and just hold me
Yes.
and be with me in that vulnerable moment. But what came in my head was this longing for fruit. And part of what sugar is sugar it represents the mother, it represents sweetness. It's our first taste in the world is sweet. Um, Hopefully, as a newborn, when you come into this world, then you are laid in your mother's breast and you will suckle shortly thereafter. It's after the feeling of separation that happens when we go through during birth, the first then sense of reconnection. So I think there's something in us that goes back to that when we're wanting that sense of connection, when we're wanting that sense of nurturing the mother energy. The
Yes.
sugar is the shorthand for that. So the fact that I did have some fruit today, was it wrong? No, because in some ways eating gave me that taste of that, but I was also highly aware that what I was really needing was that deeper ceremony. And so I'm planning something, even if it's just um, outside and me in the woods. I'm
Hmm.
going to do something for myself that really honors this transition that I'm going through.
Probably
Um,
that's a wonderful example. So I guess what you're saying is when people have that feeling of that craving, to sit with ourselves for a moment, to try to connect with what's really going on there, and not just
yeah.
jump to the end result of eating the bag of M&Ms.
Yeah. Or not, I think what I also see people really struggle, and this kind of breaks my heart, is it's like they see cravings as almost like a proof that they've done something wrong. They can be frightened of them and they can think like, oh, did I eat the wrong thing? Was I thinking the wrong thought? Was I feeling the wrong emotion? Particularly with things like you mentioned, anger, it's a big one that people really don't want to feel. So they can blame themselves for these cravings that are coming up. And it's like the Rumi poem of looking at all emotions as visitors and welcoming them in. And so
Right.
if we can, and that's where it's so important. It's really not so much about the sugar as, well, what relationship do you have to it? And are you
Right.
looking at your cravings as this enemy that I'm going to stamp out? Or are you willing to look at it as information, and often very loving information, whether it's saying celebrate or mourn or dance or move your body, or it can be that gentle prompting of you're hungry, which isn't a beautiful act in itself. We live in these bodies that need to be fed every day.
Right.
Um, we're not just floating in the ether, you know.
Carly, what do you tell people? What advice do you give for people who are going out to some kind of event? And then, we've talked about how we have people
Yeah.
who want to have you give you some treat that they've made. And I want you to go ahead and talk about this. And we are on live TV, and I just got a note on my computer that my battery is got 15 minutes, so it must not be plugged in tight. So I'm going to go fix that while you're going to keep talking.
Okay.
I'll be right
Yeah.
back.
Okay. Yeah. So, what to do when you are out with people and they're wanting you to eat a certain thing? What that ties into is uh, when we're eating with someone, I share that the word companion means a thread. It's a primary way that we create feelings of connection. It's one of the ways we bond with people. And so what happens when you're out with someone and let's say they're having dessert and you're not going to have dessert with them is it can create feelings of subtle feelings of separation, of feeling like you're not as connected to them, of feeling like you're different than someone. It can also lead to feelings of deprivation or feelings of um, this sense of, oh, they get to partake and have this fun thing, this dessert, this cake, and I'm not participating with them. So either way where it goes, that feeling of deprivation or that feeling of disconnection. And with that feeling of disconnection, then there also can be that a feeling of perceived pressure where people are wanting you to join in with them. And what's often underneath that feeling of people wanting to join in and have you eat sugar with them is because when you're eating and sharing a meal together with them, it does create that bond. It's a primary way that we connect as human beings. Um, and I won't go super much more into it, but that's where studying with my mentor in developmental psychology really helped me understand what was going on, and really understanding that basic sense of wanting to belong and connect with others because we're wired for it. We're wired to have that connection. So the thing that you learn to do when you're with others, let's say they're having cake and you've chosen not to participate, is to find ways where you can still stay connected with them, even though you're choosing to do something different. This can also work, let's say that you're at a Thanksgiving dinner with people and everyone else is eating all kinds of things that you're not eating. So find ways that you connect. In other words, how can we soften any feelings of defense, any feelings of judgment, any feelings of superiority? Because sometimes we can have subtle feelings of superiority. If we can soften all those feelings and find ways that we connect. So let's say you go out to dinner with your friends and they're all eating cake and ice cream and they're like, come on, join us. And you can just say gently, no, I'm not going to join you tonight. But if your energy is really attuned to them and attuned to connection, so maybe you're just even sitting there silently in your heart, thinking about things that you love and appreciate about those other people. Where's your heart? If your heart is in a space of connection with them, find other ways that you're alike. You can even just say, I'm so glad we went out to dinner with each other. I really enjoyed sharing this meal with you. Focus on the connection. And then the fact that you have this subtle difference of to eat dessert or not to eat dessert, then that container of connection, particularly if you're connecting with them in your heart, is big enough to hold difference. And one of the way my mentors described this to me is when you're out with others, can you also hold on to yourself? And this is true not just with sugar. So it's that ability, and I think there's a famous Rilke quote that talks about this, about how in relationships, if you have two solitudes that greet and protect each other, it's this idea of the connection and the relationship is big enough to hold difference. You don't have to like the same music. You don't have to eat the same things.
But
You don't,
respect, right? Respect what's going on in both of those.
yeah, and so it's just this container. Now, what's challenging for many people when they're out at a dinner with other people or at a party is that they can feel some sense of pressure from other people of wanting them to join in. And so with that, um, particularly if you're very sensitive or very empathic or empathetic, it's easy to kind of just go with the flow and easy to, um, you can feel pressure within yourself of wanting to just kind of flow right downstream and do what everybody else is doing. So in that case, one of the things that you can do is Give yourself a moment to collect yourself, um, where where you can say, okay, what am I thinking and feeling, and not just what the other person's thinking and feeling. And
Right.
sometimes the way to do that is to take a break and go to the restroom and just take a few deep breaths and collect yourself, and then go back out with your friends or go to the party. Or let's say it's a holiday, go for a little walk and come back. And that can give you that space where you can decide, do I want to eat the ice cream just because everyone else is eating it? Or is it something I truly want to do because it's coming from inside of me? Uh, so I know you were gone for a second, Lynette, but what I was talking about was when you're really sensitive or empathic or empathetic, it's really easy to feel other people's energy or other people's desires for
Right.
sugar. And it's
Yeah.
easy for you to just kind of flow downstream and feel those same feelings. So what I was describing is a way of collecting yourself, taking yourself out of the situation for a few moments. So my favorite is going to the bathroom, or if you're at a party somewhere where you can go to the walk, go on a little walk and just take a few minutes to center yourself within yourself. So if you have a favorite quick meditation or just a centering exercise, it could just be taking a few deep breaths so that you can connect to your own energy and your own intentions and desires, and then go out with others again and decide, okay, am I going to join and eat the ice cream, or am I just going to?
And I think it would be good too to have allies, right? To have some friends or colleagues or family members who appreciate what you're trying to do and support that.
Yeah.
I think
So
that would be
that's really
great.
interesting. So one of the things that I teach in my work is this idea. Let's say someone who's listening to this is saying that they want to be one of those people that absolutely does not eat sugar. And if that's the case, then and then they're trying to not eat the sugar, then there are going to be times where they feel overwhelmed, where the sugar cravings are intense. And what I tell people is don't look at that as a failure. Just plan for them. It's no different than as a parent. You're going to have times where you lose your cool, where you get frustrated, where you say something that you didn't mean to say, where you lose your temper. If you can plan on them and just know that's going to happen, then when it happens, it doesn't lead into such a shame spiral, because it's the shame spiral that then tends to prompt more and more binging, and tends to prompt then, like if they have a bowl of ice cream, that feeling of, oh no, I've fallen off the wagon, and then it's a free for all.
Yeah.
And so just planning for it. So I call it scaffolding. Scaffold, scaffold, scaffold. If you're someone that knows when you travel, if you know that for women, certain times of your cycle, if you're under stress, if there are certain times in your life where you can predict. For often people, it's when they're overtired or when they're hungry or when they're, a lot of people, it's the end of the day. If you know that's a time where you're going to struggle, if it's out with friends, plan on it. Just count on it. It's not like it's not like that may not be something that you're ever going to completely, quote, transcend. In some ways, it's just making
Yeah.
room for your humanity. Like you're a
Yeah.
human being.
I had to come
So,
to terms with that myself because it's like I don't think
mhm,
I'm ever going to just wake up and say I never want to have a Snickers bar or whatever it is.
so
And
if,
that's okay, and
yeah,
it doesn't make me a bad person. It
no,
doesn't make me a weak
uh-uh.
person. It's just something that I live with and I've learned to deal with and adjust to.
Yeah. Like it's really it's this soul opening embrace of, can you really make room for that? Can
Yeah.
you really make room for your humanity? Um, which is why I talk about this idea of growing human kindness. Because with my eating disorders, what I was trying to do was I was really trying to be this perfect human being. I wanted to give me the right psychological tools, the right inner healing, the right spiritual tools, give me the right diet. I wanted you to give me all those things, because what I was trying to achieve was a state of perfection where I wouldn't experience negative emotions. I would never do things that I regretted. I would never experience cravings. I would never have pain. I would never hurt. I mean, I was
That's a
trying.
tall, tall order, my friend.
Yeah, I was trying to basically overcome my humanity. And with some of the wording for that I find really interesting. I mean, I was trying to be God. That's what I was trying to do. Just make me God, and then everything's fine. And
Yeah.
because I'm really smart and I'm conscientious and earnest, I thought I could just apply myself and do it. And it sounds so comical, doesn't it, when you just say it like that? But that's what was underneath so much of my striving. And that's what I see with so many people. They write and they say, give me the diet. And what they're really wanting is they're really wanting to be in control.
Right.
And life is not about control, and it's not about getting it all right. And so if you can make room for the fact that you're going to have sugar, or if you make room for the fact that sometimes you're going to eat something that makes you feel like crap, it's like my orientation isn't even on that with food anymore. For myself, I just look at it as um, I enjoy eating and trying different foods, and I have a general sense of foods that make me feel good and foods that are healthy for my body or not. But it's not that same neuroticism that I had before. And there's this ability to really enjoy food. And um, so many of the restrictions that I had in my life with food, I just don't follow anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just such a relief. It's such
I
a
would think
relief.
too that parents that have children have to
Mm.
set an example, right? Because we know we have such a huge obesity rate in this country, and we know that a lot of times people are eating poorly. We know they're eating a lot of sugar or foods that don't have good nutritional value, and I would think that would be very challenging, particularly people who don't have the means or don't have money. I mean, I've watched all these TV shows and specials about how much more
Hmm.
expensive it is to buy organic food, and how it's just easier and
Sure.
faster when you're so it's really a challenge, but I mean, it's an epidemic and an issue and a problem that really needs to be addressed.
I'm chuckling to myself because I think we spend more on food. Now, granted, there's six of us in our family than in our rent. I think it's pretty. I think it is pretty high up there. And I also have boys and teenagers who eat a
Oh
lot.
yeah,
But
got to
yeah,
keep
but
everything stocked. Got to keep it
oh my
everything.
goodness. So yes, it's such a great point. Now it's interesting. I could share a story about that. Um, I think that, so on the one hand, yes, there is absolutely a correlation, and it's important to look at the foods that we eat on a daily basis and our health. So for some people and for some families, I have tremendous compassion if you're living in a place where there is not a lot of fresh food, or you're just
Right,
a family that's living on the edge,
right.
that certainly that can be a challenge of having access to fresh food. And frankly, if you're a family who's struggling, it may simply be that other foods are more convenient because you're working two or three jobs. But aside from that, what I would say is that where I see a lot of kids struggling with sugar and food, as I can tell you a story about one of my own sons. Um, so I noticed last year that there were a lot of hidden candy bars that I was finding in his garbage or in his room. And my kids do eat sugar. I'll be the first one to say that. It's not something they eat every day, and generally we have treats, particularly on Saturday nights. Um, and so they do have sugar, but he was definitely buying a lot of sugar on his own when he was out and eating it. And for me as a parent, that was a sign that it had nothing to do with really what my son was eating. And it was not something that I needed to talk to him about the health benefits of certain foods or sugar. What that was a sign for me was that this is a child who was hurting and he is in pain. And he's a middle schooler, and I knew he was having a very tough year in middle school. He was not hoarding candy bars in his room because he doesn't have an awareness of what a good diet is. He
Right.
was hoarding candy bars because he was going to middle school every day and feeling uninvited, unaccepted, not seen for who he was, feeling bullied. His heart was breaking. So that was a sign for me as a parent that he needed me. He
Yeah.
needed he needed to cry his tears. He needed to feel a place where he could get out all these emotions that he was experiencing at school. He needed a safe harbor. And sugar was becoming that harbor of how he cared for his pain and how he cared for the hurt that he was experiencing. Um, so for me, that's how I responded as a parent. I realized it was not about what I was feeding him. It was really that he needed some You needed some loving arms. And I think that's true for, I would actually say that on a deeper level as a society, sugar has become such an issue right now where it's kind of like in the 90s how fat was the enemy, in the 80s, at least it
Right,
was the
right.
80s. Now it's sugar. And while, yes, on the one hand, as I said, it's great that there's more awareness about how foods affect our body and healthy food, I do think that the excessive focus on sugar right now is really missing the point that for most people, they are not lacking in nutritional knowledge, that the sugar is meeting a deeper need. And for most people, it's really meeting a need for connection. So to tie it to the biochemistry, you talked about sugar being addictive. So all addictions work on key transmitters in the brain, things that people have heard of like serotonin and dopamine in particular. And the reason why those addictions, any addictive substance, and any addictive pattern or behavior like gambling or pornography, if it's a behavior addiction, what all addictions point to is they are biochemical substances, biochemical substitutes for what we're meant to find in human relationships. So dopamine and serotonin, all those things are triggered when we're in loving connection with other people. And it's why sugar is so addictive. It's why all those things, because they're triggering on those same things. So in that case, my son was very much using those candy bars as as a relationship, as something that was soothing him, that was comforting him. He was caring for his pain in that way. So when you recognize that, that's where the biology and the psychology of the sugar addiction intersect, is understanding that's why they trigger such a powerful response in the brain.
It's really interesting. I mean, it's making me just be aware that the next time I feel that, to stop and figure out what that is. Usually there's so much going on. Sometimes it's active, fun, good stuff, but you've given me a really good assignment now.
Yeah.
Take
And that
that time.
need for connection is so huge. I mean, that's what, at a fundamental level, that's what I was needing today. When all of a sudden I had visions of fruit in my head because
Right, right, right.
I was needing connection. I wanted my loved ones to celebrate, and it was a grieving and a joyful process. It was both, which is such an interesting mix, which was kind of life. I needed people around me to witness that with me.
Right.
And I wanted to feel their embrace. I wanted to feel them with me. I wanted to share it with someone. I didn't want to just feel it on my own.
Right.
So whether it's joy and celebration, whether it's relief and release, whether it's having someone to hold you as you cry because it's something painful that you experienced,
Right.
that need for connection is so fundamental. And so I think if we really wanted to transform the health in our society, if you want to end the obesity crisis, it is not at all about teaching people what to eat. It's creating connection. You can create a world of connection, greater connection and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
That would go a long ways, I think, towards really
So that's
changing and
really
shifting that.
educational process, and finding, having people who are in the positions to share that message, to be educated and articulate about it, so that that's what people will do. Because I think now what people do, I know even myself, it's like you kind of beat yourself up, and
Yeah,
you're very anxious about it, and particularly if you've done good for a really long period of time, and then
yeah,
you're just like, what? Even when you're doing it, it's like periods of time when I'm eating too much sugar, even as literally as I'm eating it, it's like, oh, this is yummy, this is wonderful. But like the second I'm done, it's like, why did I do that? I feel like crap. That there was no positive, redeeming, qualities in what I just did, and then you're just like, and you can't go backwards. But you, so yeah, it can be this sort of um, continual cycle of
yeah,
beating yourself up for not being strong enough, not being focused enough, not being, just not having your
yeah.
act together. When we're in a society where we're supposed to have our act together,
I
right?
know. That's the biggest fallacy. I think underneath the sugar obsession is our cultural obsession with control. Truly.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah. Why
cultural
can't I
obsession.
control it? Or I control all these other things in my life. Why can't I
Yeah.
control this? I think that's what can be really confusing and conflicting, right? Because
It's control, it's individualism, this idea I should pull myself up by my bootstraps and do
yeah.
this myself.
And
And it's
our culture facilitates that. That's what we
it
see
does.
around us. That's what we think is successful. That's
Yep.
what smart people do.
Yep.
Um,
And
or that's what we
frankly,
think they do.
it's in a lot of our spiritual circles too. It's in our psychology. The whole self-help culture is this idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps
Right.
and change it. And one of the things that deeply changed my life, one of the people I studied with, was my mentor in developmental psychology. He really teaches about attachment theory, the child-parent bond. And the things that he taught me blew me away because I realized he was talking about things that were so much deeper than just the parent-child relationship. And he was the one who taught me about how that need for connection, he explained it. It's the preeminent need we have as human beings, meaning we are constantly seeking to fill that. It's what our brains are moving us towards
Well,
chronically. And
you've heard
even,
those stories years ago about like how many hugs we need a year, a day, that kind of
oh,
connection, and what happens to young people they talk about who are abandoned or don't have that, and they have all sorts of issues
yeah,
and challenges as they grow older because of that lack of connection with
yeah.
others. So it's really critical, and it's just such an interesting perspective to take on it because I haven't really heard it from this
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
in some ways, what we're saying is with sugar, it's connect. Instead of trying to go internal where you feel like you need to fix it yourself or solve it, reach out, connect. So that could be reaching out to whatever your spiritual practice is, to the divine, however that is for
yeah,
you. That is the switch because um, it's to reach out to other people, to people that you love and that love you, to reach out to the greater world. It can be for many people to reach out to life itself, to nature, to reach out to the divine, to reach out to your own deeper heart, which for some people, depending on how you look at it, is one and the same thing. But
and also I
that's
think
the
right, Carly,
movement.
to pause in that moment of impulse. I mean, that's what I've
Yes.
trained myself to do,
Yeah.
and not in the kind of deep way that you've talked about, which I'm going to try, but at least to pause and say, do I really want that
Yeah.
anymore?
Or
What
even
if I
that
just,
pause can be, what am I feeling and what am I yearning for? Because longing is actually a form of love. So when we're longing for something, there's a quote from Rumi where he says, "Don't drink water, be thirsty." And what he's speaking to is that idea of keep that longing, that yearning. It's like a call and response. It's us crying out for love. It's like when my babies were little and they would cry, I would pick them up or I would nurse them. I would respond to that cry. And so
right,
our longing, whether it's whatever that longing is for, in that moment, what we're doing is longing. So in that moment of impulse, when we're wanting, and all sugar is really just one way we've latched on that we can satisfy that longing. So a way to reframe to end this call, and a way to looking at sugar is not looking at it as something that I'm bad because I didn't control. What if it is simply the longing that is in you is just so big that it's trying to break out of you. And the only way we can try to frame it or understand it is as that sweetness for sugar. What we're really longing for is something so much deeper.
right,
It's that desire to connect in here and to connect out there with life.
but then I guess the second part of that is once we recognize that, to figure out how to have that other connection. Maybe some of us
Yes.
have a partner, have kids, or have a dog, or have something, but to acknowledge that we, as human beings, we need that. No
Hmm.
matter how much people want to go and be a hermit or not connect with other people, that's in
Yeah.
our nature to have that connection.
Yeah, I think you just touched on that's the crux. That's what's so much harder. In some ways, Lynette, it's so much easier for us to just teach people the nuts and bolts of what to eat and what a healthy diet is. But if you're telling people the answer is connection, first of all, it's so much more vulnerable. And I can't give you a five-step roadmap to that.
Right.
There isn't, because it's really about what do we create in our families, in our community.
Right.
I've got above right up here, I can't see it, but it's one of my favorite quotes from Mother Teresa, and it's, "If we have no peace, it is because we've forgotten that we belong to one another." And it's that belonging, we belong to one another.
Right.
And so a one way, if someone's listening to this, that they can act on that is be willing to be vulnerable with one person in your life about your relationship with sugar. So you don't have to share it with everyone. Pick someone safe, pick someone that you feel is trustworthy, that can hold that, and just tell them, sometimes I just really lose it with sugar, and I feel guilty, and I feel embarrassed when I eat too much, and I feel embarrassed by how much I crave it, and I just wanted to feel less alone, and I
Right.
wanted to talk to you about it. I mean,
Well,
that's where it
now with the
starts.
internet too, there you can find different
Oh,
support groups and people who are going through the same thing you are. So we don't have to walk this path alone.
no.
Sometimes people feel alone. I know times in my life when I've been dealing with the sugar thing, I felt alone, particularly if I'm with other people who
Yeah.
don't have the same problem with it. Like, why am I dealing with this and they
Yes.
don't? But there's always, I really believe there's somebody out there that you can connect with or talk to who will be a
Yeah.
good listener or who has experienced the same thing that you're experiencing.
Yeah, or someone who, it could be someone in your life who's also dealt with addiction. Because anyone who's dealt with addiction would understand the craving and the feelings and all that goes
And
with
Carly,
it.
I have to say, it'd be harder for me to find somebody who hasn't dealt with some kind of addiction of some sort or another. I mean, we're human
Yeah.
beings. We're all dealing with something. I mean, I'm just thinking about my universe, and most people I know are dealing with, trying to figure something out. Carly, can you take a moment and tell us about your books? We're winding down, and I want people to. This has been a really invigorating conversation, but I
Yeah.
want them to know how they can reach you. And clear, I know because for the viewers out there, I first came across Carly because somehow on the internet I found her, and I was like, ah, this is somebody who's
Oh,
dealing with exactly what I'm dealing with, and I signed up, and I really enjoyed getting the material that I've been able to receive. So we want to tell the viewers how
yeah.
they can connect with you, tell them that again and again. Tell the name of some of your books and talk a little bit about what's coming up.
Sure. So you can find more about me at, again, my website, which is www.growinghumankindness.com. And you can buy my book, Overcoming Sugar Addiction, which is really about my personal story of coping with a sugar addiction, as well as Overcoming Sugar Addiction for Life, which is a book, a workbook, and a CD set. And those both are geared towards people. If you're listening to this and you're someone that you recognize that you very much need to limit how much sugar you're eating, or you're wanting to understand how you can eat less of it, those are a great resource for you. You can get those on my website and on Amazon.com. I have also written a 30-day program to help you eat less sugar called the 30-Day Lift. And that's an audio-based program. It's actually my best-selling program. People really like it. And what's great about the 30-Day Lift is you get 30 days of audio coaching and emails from me. And what it's meant to do is gently support you as you transition into eating less sugar. And with the 30-Day Lift, I encourage you to tailor it and tweak it for you. So some people go into it thinking, I want to eat less. Some people think of it, I want to experiment and see what 30 days of no sugar feels like. It. I've had people go back and do the 30-day lift 4 or 5 times because then they use it for shifting other habits, like I want to go to bed earlier, or I want to watch less TV, because they find the structure of it. It's really about understanding how you can shift habits out of compassion, and gets into a lot of the nuts and bolts that we were talking about. What do you do with your out with others? I give you exercises of this is how you can soften cravings and what to do and walk you right through it. So it's a great program. And then I wrote another program called When Food is Your Mother, and Heal Overeating Untangled. And Heal Overeating Untangled gets into how to heal overeating, because what a lot of people find is after they stop eating sugar, then they're overeating other foods. And so if that's you, Heal Overeating Untangled is the program for you. And it's really about changing the relationship that you have to yourself and to the overeating to shift how you're eating. When Food is Your Mother is a program I wrote last year. And that's a program that, in particular, a lot of counselors and therapists really like, because it gets into all the stuff we were talking about connection. And it really looks at all food addictions and compulsions are at their root emotional bonds. And it's about healing and shifting that emotional bond, about replacing the emotional bond that you have with sugar or with binge eating or overeating. Or for some people, the emotional bond is the compulsive pursuit of a perfect diet. Or for some
Really?
people, the
No, I was just going to say, it sounds like you have literally something for everybody, which is wonderful. So I'm encouraging everyone to go to Carly's website. We've been with Carly Randolph Pittman. I feel reinvigorated and re-inspired to
oh, I'm so
particularly really pay
glad.
attention to why I'm feeling what I'm feeling when I'm dealing with the sugar issue. And I
Mm,
can't thank you enough for being on the show. The hour just flies by, but it's been great.
yeah.
And I want to encourage people to check out what Carly's offering. I want to thank you again for being on the show. And I look
Yeah,
forward to
thanks
us
for having me.
remaining and staying in touch. So it's been a real
Yeah.
delight.
Thank
And
you.
so
It
I
was so
want
much
to,
fun.
my pleasure. So I want to thank everybody out there who's been watching. The Positivologist is in the house. Remember, it's all about bliss. BLISS. Believe life is something special because it is, and so are you. You can
Mm,
connect with me at www.positivebliss.com, and I'll see you again right here next time on The Positivologist is in the house. Namaste and many blessings.
namaste.